So how should I begin this story?
Jeez, if you don't want to, I could take over from here, you know. Besides, isn't starting from the beginning just common sense?
What? You want me to go all the way back? Do you have any idea how long that would take? Nay, we shall start from a town named Strandheim, when it was spring, and the arbitrarily chosen year was 621. I say it's arbitrarily chosen since humans had actually started counting the centuries again only some time after the last Great War.
Blah, blah, blah.
The remains of that war are very much present still, though not in the form you might first expect. In this town, a small platoon from the Avarian army was preparing for its next mission.
Hey, don't just ignore me.
Their orders were to inspect a nearby rune mine and bring back any runes worthwhile. For this purpose, they had also hired a young runic apprentice by the name of Leaf.
Now, hold on. Why are we following this insignificant bookworm? What is he going to amount to in the grand scale of things?
Well now, give it time. This is what one would call starting from a smaller scale. It'll be alright, in the end.
Whatever you say. What's with all those peculiar details?
Don't worry about it, it's just a little tidbit.
This sure is the pits. That pesky inn we had to sleep in was one thing, but seeing just how slow the mornings here are makes me think of it all over again.
And this time it's actually normal?
I take it you haven't been to this town before, sir?
No way. You'd need to have really rotten luck to be assigned to the middle of nowhere like this.
The man was right, as Strandheim was a rather small, remote fishing town near the southwest border of Avaria. The weather here was rather warm all year long. Then again, that was pretty much the only positive thing to say about this town.
Wooden houses built side by side formed a network of sprawling alleys and tiny streets. And yet, the town's market square was actually the only part of the town that was paved. Only a few merchants were setting up their stalls, and near the pier, a few sailors were preparing their fishing boats. For Leaf, accustomed to the busy streets of the capital, it must have felt like the entire town was still sleeping.
Well, doesn't that make us the unlucky ones, then?
Hardly. This is a quick job. Get in, bring back what you can, and get out.
That's awfully convenient. Here's to hoping the site ain't flooded by monsters.
Now that'd be real rotten luck.
His laughter didn't exactly convince Leaf, but the young man decided staying silent was of least effort.
Leaf was a young man only nearing his 20s, a scholar at the Avarisburg Institute for Magic Research. His hopes were to study magic, settle down eventually, and then make a stable living by just reading and writing, which were all relatively conservative for someone his age. But then again, this boy was no soldier either. His short and slender stature was complemented by a sly, bespectacled face and brown hair. His cheap clothes indicated a rather modest upbringing, but the numerous runes overflowing from the pouches of his belt were nothing to scoff at either. Though, despite his appearances, his sarcastic streak had a tendency to get him into trouble from time to time. But he always had the wits to back up his words.
Now wait a minute. How come you're spending such a long time describing this boy after just calling him an insignificant bookworm?
Huh? Well, excuse me. This is what they call setting up the stage. You need to get some background laid out there, and build it all up slowly.
Puh! Nonsense. If you spend too much time dilly-dallying around, the audience will lose their interest. Now watch and learn. Now, these mines were, of course, mines only in name. It was no secret, after all, that runes were actually dug up from the battlefields of the past. While the exact details have been lost amidst the shadows of history, the weapons and other reminders of past battles seem to be plentiful wherever these magic stones were found.
But the weapons of the past were also the technology of today, as the magical power of the runes could be channeled into various mechanical devices, not only for combat, but also for fueling the growing industry.
Yet, to this day, no one seems to know the exact origin of the runes, or how they were produced.
And so, mining them from the old battlefields was the only way to acquire these crucial artifacts, which had become the very power keeping the gears of the society running.
Always trying to one-up me, aren't you?
You sure it's not the other way around?
We'll see about that. On with the story. Meanwhile, Cole's platoon had made its way past the gates of Strondheim. While I speak about a platoon, Cole's unit certainly wasn't amongst the more organized units of the Avarian army. Including Cole himself, the whole unit consisted of 10 men. Or to make a slight correction, 9 men and 1 woman.
The woman in question was Lean, coming from a family with a long history in the military service. Even she herself had felt the obligation for choosing a soldier's career. Coming straight from a prestigious military school, her short nerves and overly confident attitude had ruined her chances for a promotion once in the past, and now she was stuck serving as second in command for Cole's unit.
So, if I recall correctly, the mine was situated in the forest east from here.
That's how it is. The maps around here ain't the most accurate, but I figured that we should make it there before noon if we follow this road here, then make a beeline for the forest when it comes up.
And so the crew headed out, the tiny platoon marching leisurely in a simple line alongside the country road. All kinds of small talk, mostly on beer, food, and women, as you'd expect from a group of burly men, was made as the undisciplined bunch marched across the fields.
Then again, Cole himself wasn't the most disciplined soldier either. His experience and natural talent for fighting had gotten him this far, but his lack of manners and low ambition also meant that he was stuck as a petty commanding officer. But, unlike Lean, Cole was actually pretty content in his current position. There were few things he loved more than drinking and fighting.
You can't be serious.
No, I kid you not. That was only the beginning. So, as I was saying, this drunken lad...
Meanwhile, Lean seemed quite annoyed at the 2 soldiers telling a story to pass the time.
Could you 2 keep it down? First of all, your conduct is highly inappropriate for a soldier. Second...
And all the while, Leaf just observed the situation from afar, thinking along the lines of, should I bother doing something about that? Sticking his nose into other people's business, as he saw it, was not something Leaf did often. But this time, couldn't help his own curiosity.
Must be tough, trying to keep discipline in a group like this.
Just what did you say?
Leaf's comment didn't go unnoticed, though Lean didn't seem to care too much.
Well, that much is certainly true.
Hey, do you really think you can just ignore us?
Though, in retrospect, that's exactly what he did. Completely unhampered, Leaf continued.
Forgive me for being blunt, but you seem pretty different from the rest of this group.
Well, ain't he awfully suave here?
Don't underestimate a man who makes his living by reading and writing.
You bet I do. Graduated from a Runeous Military Training Institute. Well on my way to a respectable rank. And where do they transfer me? To a petty little group like this. I can't understand what the higher-ups are thinking.
It didn't take too long for Leaf to realize there was probably some kind of deeper reason for all of that. But prying any deeper would have shown bad tact. Not to mention, would have been outright dangerous.
And meanwhile...
Hey, aren't you 2 forgetting something here?
Let's just say, the 2 weren't the only ones forgetting something.
Is that how you treat a superior officer?
After several hours on the road, and another spent tromping through the forest, the platoon finally arrived at the rune site.
This is the place?
Having passed through the woods, they had come to a small open area, but even though it was a forest, it was dead quiet. Something about the atmosphere wasn't quite right.
Should be, if the villagers were telling the truth.
But we should be careful. According to some theories, runes are causing anomalies in the flow of magical energy, which occasionally has malicious effects with nature.
Huh?
As it looked like his explanation wasn't quite understood, Leaf was forced to revise his wording.
I mean, we could run into monsters here.
It has been awfully quiet for a while now.
Then why didn't you say so?
There was no answer. The group fell silent as they felt that the ground itself had begun to shake.
You said something about monsters and whatnot, but isn't this a little ridiculous?
Given that we're in this mess, I don't think if that's the word I'd use.
The said creature looked every bit like a horned beetle. Well, that is, if horned beetles were 9 feet tall and ferocious.
All things considered, Cole and his men were no strangers to situations like this. Monster extermination was one of the army's tasks, next to hunting down bandits and keeping order. Still, apart from speculation, no one seemed to know where these monsters came from. A beetle would not grow 9 feet under normal circumstances, that much was for certain. But just who or what was responsible?
Got no choice but to stand and fight. Get into formation. Spears at the front, archers to the back. Lean, you and me will go in from different sides. Got it?
Arrows ain't working on that thing!
Then aim for its damn eyes!
The creature's tough carapace seemed to deflect every attack. The arrows bounced right off. The men cursed and yelled at each other angrily, but somehow their formation held together, even as the creature stomped towards them.
We've got to aim for its leg joints!
How about you try aiming at something like that? That thing is just gonna crush anyone who goes anywhere near it!
Then, something completely unexpected happened. Clumps of ice seemed to materialize from thin air, binding the creature's middle legs.
What the?
I don't care what it is! Now's our chance!
Poole and his men made quick work of the monster, poking their spears and swords into the slits and gaps between its carapace blades. In the end, you could almost feel some pity for the poor creature.
Overheated again. I guess it still needs more work before it's ready for practical use.
In his hands, he held a metallic gadget of delicate shape. The various pipes seemed to glow red from heat, and in the center of the contraption, one could see a glowing runestone.
As Leaf stood there, gathering discredulous looks from all around, an ominous silence permeated through the whole group. By now, runes were quickly becoming more and more famous, but outside the capital, magic was still a rarity. Those living in the countryside had obviously never seen runes, let alone magic.
Eventually, Lean was the first one to break the silence.
That ice? Don't tell me. You somehow...
Well, yes. This is a rune amplification device. Or should I say a prototype I'm working on.
Commonly, magic was channeled from runes with an amplification device, a mechanical apparatus built solely to convert magical energy into a more useful form. Designed largely through trial and error, they were delicate contraptions, often large enough to fill an entire room. Smaller devices like the one Leaf carried were one of a kind, but the power that could be channeled through such a device was highly limited.
Well, whatever it is, it ended up saving us. That beetle was a tough nut to crack.
He just totally did that, didn't he?
He did, and he probably thinks it was pretty damn smooth, too.
Though he would never consider it himself, perhaps his honest reaction was just what the situation needed. The tense atmosphere was suddenly wiped away as the group burst into a bout of friendly laughter.
So you are more than just talk. I'm actually impressed, little.
If that impressed you a little, I have to wonder just what kind of scale you were thinking with.
Laughing at each other, Leaf was starting to feel a connection towards Cole's platoon. He was no longer just a hireling on a temporary assignment. They were comrades now. Having to trust someone else with your life wasn't such a bad feeling when they trusted you to protect theirs in return.
Afterwards, the group split up, searching the forest for runes, as they were plentiful where signs of past battles lay. The forest had concealed such signs well, but not entirely. Here or there you could find a battered helmet, half buried in the ground, or a rusted sword stuck under a tree root. Their owners were nowhere to be seen, though.
So, I'll be checking this end then.
Hey, Lane, go after him. He's still a civilian, so we can't leave him alone.
I guess it can't be helped.
Shrugging her shoulders in an overly grand manner, she then hurried after him. Meanwhile, Leaf had indeed found something. Though, that something was completely different from what he had been looking for. It was a girl, roughly the same age as him, dressed in a long gown, embroidered with elaborate patterns. But, if you looked closer still, you could make out tiny horns on her head. Curved and spiraling on the side of her head, they somehow gave the girl a dignified yet mysterious look. Leaf faintly remembered having read of horn-headed people. The Jakawi, a nomadic race as old and as unchanging as time itself. Their horns were said to be the source of their magical powers, and indeed, they seemed to be able to command magic at will.
Hey,
Leaf hailed out to the girl, but since their languages were different, it only resulted in confusion. They both flailed their arms, trying to explain their situations, though not a single word was understood by either side. As it didn't seem like they could hope to converse with each other, Leaf found himself trying a simpler method of communication.
I'm looking for these. Seen any?
Pulling out a rune from his pouch, he pointed at it, only to see the horned girl turning her head sideways in that universal gesture of vague curiosity.
Though just then, the rune in Leaf's hand started glowing by itself, and similarly, the horns were also emitting a soft blue glow, as if they were resonating with the stone. Suddenly, Leaf could hear a voice inside his head, though the girl's lips weren't even moving.
Is that magic?
Was that your voice?
Pointing at the horned girl, Leaf stood there with a blank face. Though he was well versed in magic, he had never read of anything quite like this. The two seemed to be able to trade thoughts freely, without even opening their mouths.
Yay, I'm actually communicating with a member of another species. This might be a first.
Very funny. Anyway, I go by the name of Leaf. And you?
Amy.
It seemed that it was all she was going to say about herself.
Just how did you manage to wander off this far? Wait a minute. Who's that? A Jakawi?
Yeah. Seems to be from a local tribe. Her name's Emmy.
Huh? You can actually speak the Jakawi language?
Well, something like that.
What do you mean with that girl being troublesome? Is she someone dangerous?
Hey, don't be poking around in my head like that. Anyway, she's not after my life or anything, but I'd still suggest you stay away from her. Let's just say she has a short temper, and a habit of jumping to conclusions.
What's with those looks you two are exchanging? Do you know something that I don't?
See what I mean?
I see. And I will see you again. Maybe.
Sending such a thought his way, the horned girl turned away and disappeared quietly into the forest.
Hey!
I'd suggest you leave her be. Someone like that has got nothing to do with our orders anyway.
Hey, I found something.
Nevertheless, his voice didn't sound too delighted about his own discovery. Where the man was pointing, you could see the half-burnt remains of a wagon, the charred skeletons of the poor soldiers still sitting in the back.
The 600-year-old war.
And, as to remind them of the very cause of this past destruction, a small number of runes laid scattered around the scene. Plain gray stones inscribed with dark patterns, their meaning long forgotten. Were they really worth all those past battles? A dozen more skeletons were lying on the ground. You could no longer tell who fought for which side, as only their bones and some metal parts of their equipment remained. The banners of their countries had been long forgotten, and been withered away by time. No honor remained here, just death.
Witnessing such a scene, the group remained silent.
We should give them a proper burial.
The mention of manual labor incited some subdued grumbling from the soldiers. Yet, everyone agreed to pitch in to help. Leaf and Lean, who had neither seen any real battles, felt a little left out. Even though they did understand all this on a fundamental level, they could hardly claim to understand what seeing this meant to a seasoned soldier. Worn out, cynical, and disillusioned, those who had seen their fair share of wars definitely knew how close death loomed every step of the way.
Leaf, your first time seeing a corpse?
Her voice sounded different, like it had lost its usual haughty edge. Noticing it, Leaf seemed even more serious than usual.
To be honest, it's not. Then again, it's not something I'd like to get used to either.
Lean stared past him at the broken skeletons lying in the mud. She grit her teeth and replied,
You're blessed, since you get to think that way.
Leaf knew perfectly well what she meant, but chose not to bring it up. Some questions simply did not have a right answer.
Just who are you? I might not know you well enough, but aren't you supposed to be more unshakable?
Letting out a self-deprecating sigh, she answered.
I'm, still trying to figure that out myself.
Maybe some of Lean's bravado was just that. Bravado.
Sorry for saying as much.
Death was the constant companion of any soldier, and it certainly wasn't something Lean should have been shaken by. While Cole's group was still in the middle of the burial, something else was afoot nearby. Coming through the forest, it was another unit of the Avarian army. 20 men marching in a single line. The group halted as they noticed Cole and his unit.
Passing through, eh? And what about that girl? A hostage?
As Cole pointed out, the unit seemed to be transporting a lone girl. The very same one Leaf and Lean had met earlier.
Our orders are none of your concern.
Completely ignoring Cole's questions, the woman in charge demanded to pass through.
She's such a cowie, isn't she? Just what kind of orders are you following?
Though surrounded by soldiers, the girl seemed hardly intimidated at all. The expression on her face was completely solemn, or rather, absent.
If you're that persistent, I'll tell you. Our orders come directly from the Council of Magic Research. Our mission is to capture a Jakawi, and that's that. What happens to her after I've brought her into the Institute just ain't my problem.
You can't be serious.
Leaf, we've got no say in this.
Well, like it or not, she's got nothing to do with our orders.
While orders were always absolute to a soldier, Leaf, as the outsider in the situation, could hardly watch her being treated this way. Yet he also knew that carelessly opening his mouth could easily spell trouble. Not only to himself, but to Cole and Lean as well.
Hold on, you can't just...
Leaf was almost paralyzed, not knowing what to do next. He looked over to Cole to see what would happen next.
Seems we're not in a position to question orders.
Cole looks towards his unit and gives a nod for them to stand down, his gaze soon fixing back upon the other unit.
A wise choice. Don't make the mistake of following us too closely.
Cole's unit waits as the others make their way towards the capital with their new hostage.
What's the plan, sir? Can't we do anything to stop them?
Wait, you mean you don't want them to take her? Then why did you stop them?
Of course we don't want them to take her, but we just don't have a choice. If anything happened to those men, the council would open an investigation. It wouldn't take them long to figure out what took place here.
So what's the plan?
We head home as planned. If there's anything we can do, then we'll explore the possibilities. However, I don't fancy the chances of getting court-martialed.
Cole's unit prepared to set off on their long journey back to the capital. Leaf, eager to get back to find whatever information he can. While the capital of Avarisburg even had its own railway system, powered by the same magical runes which drove the industrial revolution of the capital, small towns like Strondheim were still as remote as ever. Making it back to the region of Avarisburg would still take them several days.
Upon the journey home, the group decided to make camp for the night. Sitting quietly by herself, Lean looked as sour as always. Perhaps even more so than as per usual. Feeling something short of remorse, Leaf hailed out to her.
Sorry for all this. I did end up dragging you with me, even though you have your position to think about.
Don't mind, it's not even your fault. That battle-crazed blockhead won't listen to reason once he has his mind made up. Honestly, if we get caught here, my career as an officer is over.
An awkward moment of silence followed, for Leaf felt that he had to ask her as much.
Say, is there a reason why you chose to join the military in the first place? It's not like that was your only option, right?
It's nothing too great of a reason. My father's a colonel, and I was his only child before he remarried. After that, he pretty much forgot I existed at all. So, I felt the only chance to get back at him was to join the military, and surpass him with my own strength. Pretty childish, isn't it?
Having said it all, she looked quite different from her usual self. Perhaps even she herself was surprised at just how honest she had been there.
Not at all. I think it's great that you have something to strive for.
Unable to reply, she simply nodded slightly before looking away into the distance.
Cole's unit finally made it back to the Avarisburg region, and were a mere train journey away from making it back home to the capital.
Alright, men, get your butts on the train. Quickly now.
his voice almost drowned out from the whistle blasts of the conductor. The train was just about ready to leave.
Though just a small military platoon, the members of the Ivarian army were well treated. The cabin well decorated with brown leather seats and plenty of legroom. This was for sure an upper-class cabin.
In just a few hours, I'll finally have a decent shower.
Oh, what's the matter? Nothing like roughing it for a few nights.
Not all of us like to live like dogs.
After taking their seats, the train soon burst into life as the short ride home began.
Just another hour, and we'll be home.
At that moment, the light in the cabin begins to fade, the train swaying more and more harshly.
What the? Something's not right.
Relax. Probably just some crossed wires causing a power outage.
That's not it.
Leaf was staring out of the window, eyes fixed upon the sky.
Don't you think it's a little strange? It's meant to be the middle of the day. Then how come it's just gone dark as night?
An eerie atmosphere began to build within the cabin. Something was very wrong indeed. Within minutes of the light fading, a bright green flash, almost blinding, emanated from the outside of the train. At this point, the train had come to a complete standstill. Every passenger aboard sat silently, confused by this strange chain of events. Cool's unit's attention was quickly directed to the end of the cabin as a sharp, high-pitched scratching sound echoed.
Ah! What the hell was that?
Whatever it is, it's coming from outside the train.
The scratching moved along the walls of the cabin and finally stopped at the door. Everyone watched intently as the handle began to slowly pull down.
Someone's trying to get in!
Someone. Or something.
Impossible. All the doors are locked tight during transit. There's no way in.
Leaf, the train isn't in transit.
A loud thud as the door flung open. Blinding light once more flooded the cabin as a figure slowly began to emerge from the door.